Hello and welcome to another episode of Unstuck with Hypnopunk Transformation with Edge. Today's episode is going to be about elements, old-fashioned elements such as fire, earth, water and air, and how these concepts affect us in every area of our life, specifically in the area of personality and in relationships. But just a big thank you to everybody who's been leaving reviews on iTunes or however you've been listening to the podcast, the 5-star reviews and the couple of sentences telling us what you enjoy. Thank you so very much. I very much appreciate it. And what happens is I do these podcasts for free, as you know, and I love to put out this content free for you each and every week. And all I ask that you do is, if you enjoy it, if you like it, you just leave a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever how you listen to it, and a couple of sentences telling me what you enjoy, because this inspires me, this motivates me to put out more content out there, to bear my soul, to give you more tools to improve your life. That's how I know, and that's what inspires me. And also, once you do leave those reviews, please do send me an email at mail@lukenosis.com, mail@lukenosis.com. Give me an email, send me a snapshot or a screenshot of the review, and then we will book you a 30-minute free Unstuck Skype session with me, which is 30 minutes where we'll work on one subject in your life, something that's been keeping you stuck, and help to give you some perhaps tools, some reframes on how to come unstuck and move on with your life. That's my gift for you, giving to me. So enough about that. Elements. So these elements, old-fashioned elements, fire, earth, water, air. Well, what element are you? Well, let's have a look at this. I'll tell you what element I am. I'm fire. When it comes into personality, it comes into relationships, I'm the fire element. Why is fire good? Why is fire a good element? Well, I'm very passionate, very a lot of energy, emotional, connected with my emotions, fired up, really want to get things done, things moving, say what's on my mind, honest, authentic. All these great things, right? Fire, a lot of great things. Very passionate, very alive, very awake. But also fire can sometimes get you in a little bit of trouble, because if you have too much fire in your life, then you can end up potentially burning bridges in your life, burning relationships with people, potentially rubbing people up the wrong way, being understood, being mislabeled as perhaps being angry or aggressive rather than being passionate in your life. So those are some of the drawbacks of fire. The other element is earth. Earth element. Why is earth element, the element of earth, good if you're an earth person? How do you identify yourself as a earth element? Well, usually an earth element is somebody who's quite level-headed, quite in touch with nature, quite grounded. You'll know this because you don't necessarily have particular highs or lows or emotions. You might do, but most of the time you're on an even keel, and you like to be connected to the ground. You like to be connected to nature, to be grounded, to be that almost that stoic force in many ways, and also in other ways be quite healing, quite nurturing. Think Mother Nature. So those are good things. Those are good things about the earth element, if that's indeed what you are, or grounded element. Some things that are perhaps not so great about that grounded element is, because you're grounded, you might be a bit stuck. Which is the opposite of this show. You might not be moving forward as fastly or in the direction that you want. You might lack some motivation to get things done. Potentially you might procrastinate about certain things as well, and be seen as being a bit as I was going to say flaky in many ways, but if you're kind of earthy, sometimes you can be quite stable. So flaky is probably the wrong word when it comes to earthy people, so let's scrap that. But yeah, you might not exactly be where you want in life, or be picking up speed in the area that you want. So that could be some of the drawbacks from earth. Then there's the water element. Water element's great because you're always flowing, you're always moving, you're going with the flow, whatever's been given your way. If it's a rough time, then you can create waves. If it's a mellow time, then you can just swim along swimmingly, if you will, in life, and just go with the flow, whatever's going, without a fixed agenda, which is very, very good. Very good things going with the flow. Where it might not be so good is depending on what kind of situation you are in. The way your river flows, the way your water flows, or if indeed you do have waves, is dependent on what the world's given you, very dependent on the people around you and the circumstances around you. Like if you're having big tidal waves in that moment, or big tsunamis, it's all being based around those people and situations that you're in, and you're responding to it. Perhaps responding to it can be quite exhausting though, and perhaps at certain times you can be going in the opposite direction you want with the wrong flow. So that can be some of the positives, but also some of the drawbacks from water. The other element, the final element, the fourth element, is air. Is the air element, or breath. Now, air is good. It's kind of translucent in many ways. You can be quite very much in the moment, very in touch with your body, in touch with your feelings. All these are potentially good things. But if you've got too much air, then perhaps you might be going off in directions that potentially you don't want to go in, a little bit like water. Perhaps if you are air, then another gust of stronger air can throw your air going in the wrong direction, in the wrong way. Perhaps your air is coming in different channels when it comes to air, and it's not exactly you're in control of it in many ways. It's more of an environmental thing of what's going on around you. Perhaps you're very transient, meaning you're going from place to place, but you've got no roots, as in earthy. So that can be some of the positives, but also some of the drawbacks with air. Now, when you take these concepts, you take them out a little bit. They all have their positives, and they all have their drawbacks. But for example, if you're fire, now we can all be all of these concepts at certain times in your life, but I'm sure you can identify with some of them a little bit more. So, for example, talking from my own experience, I'm fire. Now, if I get in a relationship with somebody who is fire as well, it's going to be amazing to begin with. It's going to be all this emotion that we're going to be throwing on one another. Amazing sex. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be fire. It's going to be passionate. Think about your favorite kind of Hollywood movies. Think about the Latino culture, stereotype or not, that we have shoved down our throat. Yet eventually we end up killing one another, maybe metaphorically, or maybe really, with the too much fighting, too much passion. So a fire, if that's your predominant element, perhaps is not the ideal person to have a long-term relationship with. Or you look at fire potentially with water. Water perhaps is not the best kind of type of person to have a relationship with, because water is the opposite of fire, which is sometimes opposites can attract, but they can also attack as well. Water puts out fire. So perhaps not the best thing to put out your fire if that's who you are. I tend to find when it comes to fire personalities, fire elements, the best type of people to have relationships with are either earthy people or air people, because earth can start to ground the fire, not put the fire out, but ground it. Rather than going up into the sky or being like a volcano, it can ground it like a campfire. Or air does have the ability on one hand to blow out fire, so in that instance it can not be favourable for a fire person, but also air has the ability to ignite fire, to make it even more passionate, to spread it, so it can be very powerful. So I tend to find that fire, if you characterise yourself as a fire element, the best type of person to be with is, number one would be an earthy type of person, who's the primary element, and perhaps secondly, or just a little bit behind, would be the air element. But you'd want to avoid, as a fire personality like myself, another fire person, at least if you want it to go more than a couple of weeks, and water. So if we look at an earth element, if an earthy person is with another earthy person, then who's going to make the first move? Who's going to make the first move to ask the other person to go out on a date? Because earthy person are usually quite stagnant. Doesn't mean they're feeling bad. Doesn't mean that's necessarily a horrible bad thing, but they're not really moving forward. They're not motivated to make changes in their life. So two earthy people, probably oftentimes, if that's your predominant element, are going to take forever to come together, if at all. So if we look at earthy people and water, oftentimes water's consistently flowing, but if it's consistently flowing all the time, water never stays still, which is the opposite of what earth is. So potentially, it's a water person's going to unconsciously try and change an earth person, or vice versa, which is going to lead to resentment. So perhaps not the ideal person. Perhaps when it comes to an earthy type person, air is good, because air can be present in that moment in that specific place, but can also spread. But also fire, going back to the concept as well of like a campfire that can be in one designated spot. So it has the ability to be on the spot, but also have those emotions, those passions from a fiery person come, or also that ability to nurture with air, to allow stuff to grow. So I think personally, with an earthy type personality, if that's what you identify yourself as, then potentially fire or air would be the best kind of qualities that you could come together with. How do you identify these? Well, how do you identify which element you are, which element your partner is just go back and listen to some of the characteristics that I've given, and these are not by far, these are not exhaustive lists of all the pros and cons to both these things. These are just concepts that I've truly, if I've ever had an original idea, it's about taking these concepts out and injecting them into certain areas of life. If I've ever had an original concept, it would be this, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't know if this is original. Maybe I'd unconsciously picked up these understandings unconsciously somewhere down along the line. But as far as I know, this is new stuff. Let's go to a water element. How to know, if you're a water element, who would you be best with? Well, fire would not be good, because you could be putting out fire, and fire is not going to be able to come into water. So pretty much fire's out there. If you're a water element, earth might be okay, but would you want to be with another water element? Possibly. Two water elements, I think, could come together, because you're consistently flowing in and out. But that might be a kind of relationship where, again, you're kind of in and out, like the water's going in one direction, and then another stream will go in another direction, and you might come and you might join in the river, or you might go your separate ways. So it could potentially work, but you could be setting yourself up for some heartache a little bit there if it's with another water element. Fire, well, water's just going to put out fire, and fire doesn't exist in water, so it's not going to work. So I think when it comes to water, probably the best element would be, if you're just pure water, would be potentially with an air element, because air is going to be moving the water. The gusts of wind are going to get trajected, if you will, into the ocean, into the water, and start to move that along one way or another, so you could kind of start to work in unison. So I think for a water element, the best kind of element to be in a relationship with would indeed be air. So that brings us to our last element of air. Who would air work with? Well, I think air would work with fire, because air will be an accelerant to fire. It could put it out, but it also could, like I say, be an accelerant to make it more powerful. The fire could give it air more power as well, to give it a little bit more spice, if you will. A water element and air, potentially, like we said, go back to the concept of what we went to with water before. Air can start to move water, but I'm not sure how much of water really affects air. So it might be a bit of a one-way relationship, where water's getting it all out of air, but air doesn't get a lot out of water, potentially. So I think when it comes to air, the best kind of relationships for the ideal partner, if there's such a thing exists, going with this model, and all this is a model, would be the concept of fire, to be the element of fire, or potentially the element of earth. The element of earth being quite grounded in what you do, and where you go. So I think that's some interesting things to take those four elements out, know about them in your personality, but also potentially how they can affect you in relationships. You can take this one step further. If you're an employer of people, you could do the Myers-Briggs, which I believe is about 96 questions, and get certified with that. If people are these weird four initials that will tell you what they are, you could do that. Cost a bit of money to do that. You could use meta programs from NLP, personality profiling, which is approximately 16 questions. Things like knowing if people are introverted or extroverted, and people's motivation strategies. But I think also a way to take that and refine it even more is, instead of having 96 questions in Myers-Briggs, 16 questions with NLP meta programs, you could see that the person perhaps you're going to employ in your company, or perhaps to babysit your children, whatever the job is what kind of element is needed for that job. I.e., for example, if you're an IT employer, I don't know a huge amount about IT, Perhaps you need somebody with the element of of can I say of some more times? Maybe they need to be the element of air, something that is moving forward. Perhaps if you hire someone who's predominantly fire and IT, they're not going to get along with the culture of the other people that you might not get along with yourself. And although they may be motivated, perhaps it will not have the best environment at all times in your office environment. If they're earthy, maybe they're not going to get the job done. Potentially water or maybe an air element, I think would be good in those kind of concepts. If you're wanting to you want to hire a good personal trainer perhaps, or someone who's going to motivate you in some area of your life. Perhaps somebody who's predominantly a fire element, who has that passion, who has that kind of emotion that you can be around, you can get by osmosis to move forward in life, to realize it is going to be exciting, and not always going to be peaks. There'll be some valleys there, but you'll feel alive, and they will in turn help you to feel alive by osmosis of hiring them. Perhaps that's a good person to kind of hire if you do want to be motivated or get to the next level in certain areas of your life. I'd imagine if I did a study, which I haven't, but a lot of very successful entrepreneurs probably have quite a lot of fire in them to prove the world wrong, to have that motivation to go forward, to have that strength to be able to deal with the valleys in their life with the mountains and the peaks that they have as well. So it's about looking at, if you are going to employ people, what kind of people that would be the prime priority of the element in their life, and if that would be appropriate in what you do. So kind of doing your research a little bit there, so you can really take these elements out and really use them in many different areas of your life. So to summarize, really kind of see what element you are predominantly. Okay, you can have all of these elements, I'm sure we all do on some level, but what is your predominant element? Know what the strengths are, know what the weaknesses are. And if you're having problems in your relationships, perhaps identify what your partner is, and perhaps either get the heck out of that relationship, or look like how you can use your best tools in your element to help nurture their best tools, like fire and air, for example. If you are in business and you're employing people, look at the kind of characteristics that are needed, but what would be the primary element that would be the driving force, and perhaps hire someone who's strong in that field and strong in that element. So there are so many ways, and this is a concept, a model that really now has been the first time that I'm actually vocalized it, to put it out. It's not written down anywhere, but it's something that I kind of have had in the back of my mind for a while, to perhaps develop a product on this, or to take this out a little bit further on how it affects us, to really use it as a powerful tool for identifying ourselves, knowing our strengths and our weaknesses, and to being able to magnify our strengths, and actually really start to shine a light on our strengths, and also really, when it comes to weaknesses, either build up those areas by developing other strengths in potential other elements that we can start to implement in our life. But it's just an idea, it's just a model right now. It's just me musing over these things at a very early stage of this. And if you have any feedback on this, or how you could use these, how you do use them in your life, or any studies you may have done on these elements yourself. And yes, I am interested in hearing kind of how they affect you, but not so earthy, fluffy, but in ways that you can identify these in your life and in other people's, and what you think the strengths and potentially the weaknesses are, and how potentially we could take this forward and develop another universal model for helping understanding ourselves, other people, our partners, our employees, and stuff like that, so we can all become together. We all can become more as a unity rather than separate, because they're all powerful. Not one of these is better than the other. They're just ways of understanding people, and indeed understanding ourselves. So thank you very, very much. And as I'd like to end the podcast now, I'd like to end it with the warrior's prayer. We face dire challenge and chance. Our lives, our way of life, it hangs in the balance. A fragile glass standing on a wire high above the asphalt. And as we pray for not one drop of rain under an overcast sky, and yet I smile. We will fight and we will bleed, and yet I smile. We shall face men, some cornered into their roles by circumstance, some desperate murderers thrilled by blood. We shall end them all, as is our charge this day, as is our sorrow, and yet I smile. We will leave our loved ones to traverse a dangerous road, rushing out of peace in the war, and yet I smile. For we will mine glory from the wrath of struggle. This day we will honour and protect this bastion of life in a land of dead, and we will win. You trust the King, we will win. And I smile and I laugh and I rejoice this day, for on this day we are joined in purpose and vision. We are a singular heart and mind. On this day we are one. We are one. We are one. Always believe. Hypnopunk.